Welcome, Pat, once again. Monday, so it must be Monday, and therefore it must be Pat McGart.
How are you, Jude?
I'm very well,
Sort of
thanks.
a dark, damp day in Donegal. I hope you have the blue skies of Ulster, as Dr. Paisley once said.
Well, you can't expect it always to be like that, and global warming will come to your aid in a couple of days' time. Don't worry. Yeah. Anyway, let's get down to brass tacks here. There's been a couple of people who have died in the last couple of days, and one of them was Vera Lynn, and she's got a great deal of airtime in recent days, particularly, and even before that with the lockdown, because they kept playing "We'll Meet Again."
The Queen used that in her address to the nation. Yes,
that's right. She did. That's right. I'd forgotten about that. Do you ever remember seeing her on TV?
Yeah, you see, Jude, I am a child of the. I was born in 1953, and Vera Lynn was still a big star then, because the war years were not all you don't really become conscious of all this till you're maybe 7 or 8. So that'd have been the early 60s, and the war would have been over maybe 15, 20 years then. But she was still a massive star. Like, what was the White Cliffs of Dover? We'll meet again. They'll always be in England. I can't even remember the rest of them, but that's enough to be going on with. Yeah. But there was a sort of thing. I suppose she had sold 1 million records by the time she was 22, and she was the forces sweetheart. And I suppose she was branded into the sort of the DNA of Britain during the war, and that's why. And then of course, Jude, the other thing, she lived a hell of a long life, 103, and apparently she's the oldest person ever to chart. Well, like if you reach 103, there's a fair chance, and you chart, that's a record highly unlikely to be broken. But she was a symbol of all that whole thing of the Second World War, when Britain was white, monocultural and whatever it is, or monocultural and all the rest. And there's a lot of harking back, that sort of nostalgia for the back in the day. Just a quick story. I remember being in Spain, and I met this wee man, and he was well into his 80s, and he was telling me that his wife wanted to go back to England, but he says to me, she wants to go back to an England where they're playing cricket on the lawn, and he says that they live somewhere in East London, and he says, that is so far gone. So Vera Lynn represented that.
Yeah, she said herself. I was listening to an interview was done with her some years ago, and she said herself that one of the reasons that she was so sort of successful was that she was kind of ordinary. She wasn't any great beauty. I mean, she was nice looking, but she wasn't a beautiful woman. And therefore, I suppose, to that extent, not threatening, to all the wives of the guys who were at war. And she referred to the British soldiers who were at war as her boys. And she would, address them at the end of a program, and hope they're well and be safe and so on. She just had a non-threatening girl next door kind of quality to her. Yeah. And her voice wasn't girlish at all. It was a sort of I hesitate to say it, but it was more like Marlene Dietrich's voice. Yeah. It was a lower pitch to it. And they were quite moving, those songs, the White Cliffs of Dover and all the rest of it, We'll Meet Again. So you can see how, she did carve a place for herself. Clearly she was important during the war. As a symbol, but even beyond that, as you say, it carried on this nostalgia that the British people had for a time when things were simpler than they were. What about the other person that has died in the last day? Was it yesterday? Bobby Storey died. Now, there's a very different figure from Vera Lynn, but his.
But he too is a symbol of our times, Jude.
Do you want to go further than that?
Well, Bobby Storey, I don't know Bobby Storey, never met Bobby Storey, but I've heard a lot about Bobby Storey. Now, I don't know how true it is or all the rest of it, but it's claimed that Bobby Storey was the mastermind behind the Northern Bank. He was just the raid on Stormont when, and I think you might have mentioned the fact
Castlereagh, I think.
The Castlereagh raid, sorry. Not one single person was hurt in either of them and all the rest. Now, apparently the RUC tried to refer to him in a slightly derogatory way as the brain surgeon or something. But if he was able to pull off those raids, and apparently very much involved in the Long Kesh escape in 1983, when 38, the biggest prison break, I think, in European history. So he was a brain surgeon, if that's, you know, but then look at the other thing. I'm sorry, I'm just this quick version. But he was interned when he was, what, 17, and then spent 20 years in jail.
20?
A lot of it on remand.
Well, I mean, 20 years out of your life.
Yeah.
As I said in a blog this morning, how you keep faith to that? Because that must have done terrible damage to his marriage and to, well, just his whole mentality. And yet, you know, he seems to be not as committed the day he died as the day when he first joined the IRA. It's interesting to see the tweets on him. You know, you have people saying that they admired him, they really staunch Republican. There are people who say that they loved him. Somebody said, you know, I don't know who it was, one of the, I think, Sinn Féin politicians, women, said to know him is to love him. But right alongside that are some of the most desperate bloody tweets from loyalists. You haven't seen them yet?
I'd say there's some pretty vitriolic ones along.
Oh, God, the gates of hell and time to rejoice and clips of bands marching and saying this is a great day and he might have escaped from the maze, but he'll not escape from God and all those. And it comes back, of course, in a way that kind of, you know, that vile talk is a logical conclusion if you believe that the whole IRA campaign was a campaign of murder. You know,
like you can, it basically comes down to, and it's the phrase, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And there's very little, you know, most of the Republicans I knew had no bother with their conscience at all. They said it was a war. They were killing us, we were killing them, and that was the way it was. And I remember many of them sort of saying, look, war is a dirty business. You know, how come the British can have statues to all the people who, there's another controversial, you know, people who are involved in wars and killings and are national heroes. Yeah. You know, some of those people were involved in awful atrocities. You know, read the history even of our own country and some of the, you know, the guys who went back to, you know, there was a program on, Brendan O'Carroll, Mrs. Brown's Boys. You ever watch that? Who do you think you are? Watch that program, and there was a very nasty murder and that committed by a guy who went back to England, became a managing director of a factory and was knighted. You know, all that sort of stuff. So, like, take your own pick.
Well, I was thinking, you know, that when these I mentioned how Vera Lynn used to talk about my boys. The fact of the matter is that those boys were carrying guns and were going out to kill as many Germans as they could. Now, I'm not saying that that war wasn't justified. I mean, I wouldn't want to live under Nazism either. But I'm just saying that was an endorsement and a fondness and a warmth for people who were going to kill. So in the end, what it comes down to is your killing legitimate, or is yours illegitimate and mine's is legitimate? Mine's is glorious, but yours is...
Yeah, God's on my side, but not in yours. And then when I die, God will take me up to the heavens, and when you die, you'll go down below, because my war is just and yours isn't. That's what the loyalist version of what Republican is, and maybe to an extent the other way around as well.
Well, I was going to ask you that. You know that. Is it the other way around? Do you have that same bitterness to the same extent?
No, well, remember Cardinal Fee got into a lot of bother years ago. He says a Catholic might kill you for your politics, but a Protestant or a Unionist will kill you for your religion. You know, and there's an element of truth in that. A lot of loyalists are, start quoting the Bible, the Lord Jesus Christ, all this sort of stuff. The Trump supporters do it as well. You know, and I think there's more judgment there, and the sort of the biblical sense from those who believe all this sort of stuff, that the gates of hell will await you and all this sort of stuff. Now, I don't think it's the same. If a mixed couple, a Catholic and a Protestant, get married in Northern Ireland, at least it was true, they could live in the Catholic area, but they couldn't live in the Protestant area, and that's factually correct, because the number of attacks on them, it's there.
I must say I was taken aback a bit by the, in the middle of all these sort of eulogies to Bobby Storey, that these people were, really, really saying awful things. And they were saying that he was guilty of all this, that, and the other, and killing so many people. Well, A, I don't know how they could know that themselves. And B, I strongly suspect that, I could be wrong, but I suspect that the people who were saying the gates of hell will swing open for Bobby's Storey were not people who had suffered themselves. That their relatives or their immediate family hadn't died at the hands of the IRA. It was somebody else, further on. That sometimes people who have suffered the most are most capable of accepting it and even forgiving people.
Yeah, but I remember at the time when they were going to, the whole thing about letting the prisoners out during the Good Friday Agreement and all the rest of it. I remember John Hume making the point that if we are dependent on people, he said, so many people have been hurt that sometimes you have to make a decision above people's heads.
Yeah.
Now, usually the most generous people are the people who have been directly hurt. It's the people around them who are actually lacking in generosity. Though I haven't said that, if somebody killed my son, I'm not so sure I'd be that generous either. So, I understand people taking a certain view.
Yeah, it is odd that, it is odd, but certainly the people who were involved in violence during the Troubles seem to have little or no difficulty, most of them, in talking to each other when the peace came, But I think people have suffered.
They don't want somebody else to go through what they have gone through. So there's almost a growing experience that, look, if we can end this now without somebody going through it, there's a generosity of spirit, and I admire that tremendously.
Well, listen, just to go back to Vera Lynn for a minute, she's sort of a unifying force with her voice, and she's a national heroine, or was, and so on. Do we have anybody like that? You suggest they do?
Daniel O'Donnell. No, I was sitting this morning.
Do you mean that?
The only person I know. Okay, some people take the the proverbial out of Daniel, but the only person that I ever noticed anybody sort of have you just even mentioned him by his first name, Daniel? They all know who you're talking about. So that's only Jude, I'll leave this one with you. Can you think have we got anybody that's sort of a national treasure?
No, I don't think anybody competes with Daniel. Daniel is certainly seen as a national treasure. My mother, who was a very common, down-to-earth woman, no room for excess emotion of any kind. She had a picture towards the end of her life. She had a photograph of Daniel O'Donnell framed and put on her mantelpiece. And I remember saying to her, you were never interested in singers or anything like that. And she said, a good boy looks after his mother.
Yeah. So many. I don't know if you can get it. I think there's an ad on RT where a woman, and she has pictures and toilet rolls and everything about Daniel O'Donnell. And one of the things it's an ad about looking after your gas. But Daniel plays against himself deliberately. It's very clever.
I've seen it.
But only Daniel could do it because on the basis that he is a sort of a national treasure and that he has this goody two-shoes image.
But have you noticed one thing about Daniel and the songs? Now, Vera Lynn's songs actually weren't what we would call rebel songs. They didn't refer to war, but they certainly referred to the end of war and, coming back home and so on. She was political in that sense, a political singer. Daniel, if you look at his back catalogue, I don't think you'll find a single rebel song there. I remember finding the same thing. I saw, for example, the three tenors, the three Irish tenors. I saw them, as it happens, in Vancouver one summer, and they sang, and frankly, I hadn't any time for them anyway, but they covered every Irish song, not a single rebel song. Now, whether you like it or not, part of Ireland's musical heritage, there's an awful lot of those songs have to do with politics. But Daniel has very carefully covered all the standards, but has avoided doing any of those, to the best of my knowledge.
I will write two or three things there. Number one, I don't agree with your description of Vera Lynn as a political. She was a unity person. Come on, Jude. She wasn't political. I don't think she was political.
Well, she was the figurehead.
She was speaking to one audience than British people. How political? How do you make that out as political?
Well, I'll tell you, because her boys were fighting, and then she was sending messages to her boys, i.e. the British Army, who were engaged in a war. She was very important for British morale throughout the war.
But there was no divisiveness in that. She was speaking to a homogenous group, the English, the British, yeah. So it wasn't really politics.
Well, I mean, she was singing to people who were totally in agreement with her, but she was still singing. She was part of the war effort. Now that's politics.
Right, okay, but that's politics with a small p. But anyway, Daniel,
okay.
But Daniel the Rebel, you're kidding. Daniel, no matter what anybody says, is one of the cleverest people going. And see this, I Love My Mammy market. It's brilliant. He replaced Andy Williams in what do you call the place in America? I can't remember the name of it. Datsun or Manson or something. Andy Williams, who was one of the biggest stars in the world. When Andy Williams died, the person he sent for, Daniel O'Donnell, it must make him a fortune. And he is acceptable by everyone, or accepted by everyone, and he doesn't get into controversy. He has lovely hair, nice suits, and he's making a fortune, and mammies love him.
Tell
What's
me
wrong with that?
This is the last question. I haven't time for any more, although I want to hear more, but I haven't time. Do you think Daniel is sincere, or is that an image that he has created?
Years ago I used to think it was fake. I am now told by a lot of people that it's actually very sincere, that he's actually a genuinely nice bloke. And these are people whose views I respect. So I don't know the man, so I'm just taking their views and I'll accept them if that's the case, that he is sincere. So
if you had to be wrecked on a desert island, which would you rather be wrecked with? Daniel O'Donnell or Vera Lynn? Jesus, Vera Lynn. Okay, Pat. Thank you. See ya. Bye.